All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode 69 of the Mic'd in New Haven podcast. We're almost at a milestone episode, almost at episode 70. So that is pretty cool. You know, who knows, depending if I talk with my next guest a long time, part two of this potential special, if it goes that long, might be episode 70. You never know. We'll see what happens. But we've gotten a lot of exciting guests throughout the time on the podcast, a lot of them from different fields. In episode 68, if you remember, we just chatted with Sports Illustrated writer Howard Beck about covering the NBA, particularly in the 90s, covering the Lakers as they began that dynasty led by Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal. Before that, retired chief of department of the NYPD, Louis Anemone. So keeping with the law enforcement theme in episode 69, let's get to my next guest. Without further ado, who's a man who spent 21 years taking on crime in New York City, joined the NYPD in 1968. His career would see him dodge death while taking down some of the Big Apple's most violent offenders. A recipient of over 60 medals, he's one of the more decorated officers, sergeants, lieutenants in the history of the NYPD. An author as well, post-retirement, or post-NYPD career, I should say. His books, Behind the Shield, A Journey Through the NYPD, and Harlem Raiders, which I, of course, have right here. Just got it. Loving it so far. Is available for all to read. It is retired NYPD Lieutenant Peter Pranzo, who joins me now on the Mic'd in New Haven podcast. Peter, it's an honor to have you. Welcome. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me on, Michael. I really appreciate it. It's an honor and a privilege.
The honor and the privilege is all mine, my friend. So, you're a lifelong New Yorker. So tell me, where in New York exactly did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
Yeah, Mike, I was born in Queens, Flushing, Queens, stayed there about a year, and then my family moved out to Franklin Square, Nassau County, a suburb of New York City.
Mhm.
And I spent 23 years there until I married Rochelle, my better half. And then we married up and we moved out to Huntington, Suffolk County, and from there, Smithtown, and now Mount Sinai, Long Island, out in Suffolk County on the beach.
Yeah, very nice, especially this time of year as the weather gets nicer. Living by the beach, there's no complaints about that. So, when would you say you first took an interest in law enforcement?
I tell you, I was a construction worker. I was a plumber for a few years in my father's union, and that was very heavy grunt work. And I was working a lot of city work, Brooklyn and Queens and Manhattan, and I saw a lot of the young people uh, going in their rookie uniforms, their gray police academy uniforms. I said, that looked nice. It looked a little cleaner, a little, I says, that may be good. And when I was a youngster in Nassau County, I was a member of the Police Boys Club. And we had the police officers who ran the organization, and they always came in their uniform on trophy night and such. And I always says, wow, that impressed me kind of a lot. So I said that was always behind my mind. And then when I was about 20 years of age, I says, you know what, let me give it a stab. And I says, I'm going to take the test. And my father was like pushing 60 at the time. And I said, Pop, I don't know this construction stuff. Can I do this until I'm 65 years old? I figured I'd take a shorter career, a little with the pension and such, And he says, yeah, but Pete, I'm going to tell you something, because times were always little tough, especially in New York City back in the 60s. And he says, they're going to be shooting at you. I says, Pop, I don't care. I says, I'm tired of carrying pipe. I can't. I'd rather get shot at than carry pipe for 40 more years. So he laughed. All right, all right. He wished me the best, and the rest is history.
Yeah, so you took that test, and the process is a little long. They have to do the background investigation. It takes a while to get the call. A lot of people don't really get the call right away. And you entered the police academy, which you would later graduate in 1968. So, as you mentioned, it was kind of a rough time in the city. This is during the civil rights era. This is really during a really turbulent time, not just in the city, but in the country. So, as you're in the academy, and you had an interesting story at the end of the academy, which we'll get to in a second. But as you're in the academy and you're learning the ropes, what was the piece of advice that the guys that were instructing you were giving you that sticks out to you all these years later?
Well, we really only got started in the academy. I went in on April the 3rd, 1968. So we went for our first day of orientation. On the second day of orientation, we were there, and Martin Luther King, Dr. King, got shot on the 4th of April. And, and I was a Long Island kid. I wasn't sure. I heard of him, but I wasn't sure about it. Martin Luther King. So what does that have to do with me? With us, the police academy, and what is that?
Right.
So the word came down to the academy, and they were explaining to us. We had absolutely no training, just orientation, filling out the health benefits cards and all that stuff. And the people in charge there, a few bosses, were up at the stage, and they were saying they're expecting some trouble. I said, I don't know. What are you talking about, trouble? I said, well, because of the influential figure that Martin Luther King was, I said they were expecting some fallout. James Earl Ray shot him in Memphis, Tennessee, and they were giving the whole history lesson, which none of us really, because it just happened. So we really didn't know the particulars. But the police department had the heads up that around the country expect some problems, because during the 60s, of course, it was a turbulent time. As you mentioned, with we had the president get shot, we had the senator get shot, and then we had the famous figure, Dr. Martin Luther King. He got assassinated. So it was the anti-war sentiment, and the 64 riots, and that took a big hold around the country, especially in Harlem, New York. So the country was on edge. It was a divided country, different than today, because the police back then we were the enemy, to a lot of people in the country. It was a shame, and the country was divided, and the anti-war sentiment and all that stuff. And it was the very beginning of the Black Panther Party. So when we were in the academy, going back, as you said, we were only there a day and a half when Dr. King got shot. Then that night, they says at 5 o'clock, they put us on buses. They said, we're going to get our guns, and you're going to get your gray uniforms. Now, I said, guns? For what? I said, what are they talking about? So you're going to get on the street. I said, wait a second. We weren't trained. They said, don't worry about it. You're going to be on fixed posts on Fifth Avenue. We're going to put you 700 kids now, young people.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Vietnam veterans, a lot of heroes, a lot of tough guys, but they were of age, And so they took us by bus. They took us downtown. They gave us the guns, and they showed us how to, load the guns. A little quick half-hour session, put them in the gun belt, but we never really shot them. They put us on another bus. They took us to the outdoor range up in Rodsman's Neck, up in the Bronx, and they lined us up. Took us by bus, got off single file, and one by one, we didn't shoot our own guns. We shot the range gun. It was laying on the cement. You picked it up, and you shot the gun 6 shots through the hoop. Not a target now, just the hoop that holds the target. Boom, boom, boom. 6 shots, double action, lay the gun down, get back on the bus. And that was our shooting training. So it was really, And then a boss, sergeant, lieutenant came by, and they pushed our regular service weapons down deep into the holster, pushed it past the safety lock that's especially a new holster, and you couldn't get the gun out. You put your finger back there and try to push it away. That gun wasn't coming out because the holsters weren't broken in properly. So that was it. The guns were locked in. We got our gray uniforms. They said report the next morning at 5 o'clock in the morning. They lined us up all along Fifth Avenue. 700 young people, all men, lined up, and that was our academy training. And we were out for a couple of weeks. And lots of things were happening around the city, but we didn't really get involved in it. But there were things happening, of course, small breakouts and problems and demonstrations and small riotous situations around the country. But nothing that we really got involved in. They took us uptown a little bit. They took us up to 125th Street by bus. We stayed on the bus, but we didn't get really heavily involved. And after a couple of weeks, we went back to the academy, and back to the academy for about 4 weeks. And it was a very hot, busy summer. They says, you're out of the academy. They put us in our blue uniforms, our regular police uniforms, and sent us around the city. And I was in the Queens Task Force, and I worked with a lot of old, tough guys, cops, good, seasoned, well-groomed, just tough guys. And I worked the whole Queens area, and I made a lot of arrests. As a young guy, I only had a few months on the job. It was like how you fall into things, how life takes you on a cycle. And then we went back for a few weeks from the academy, just quick, took a final exam, and that was it. So we really didn't have a great academy training. And I think that kind of reflected the job later on. a lot of the guys, washed out later on the job. Maybe poor training, maybe poor discipline, maybe a lack of qualification checks and such because they rushed people in back then.
Mhm.
But we survived. The majority of us survived it, and we were on the street in our permanent commands.
Yeah, I mean, you got thrown into the fire right away. It was really out of everybody's control. I mean, nobody
Yeah,
can control the circumstances back then. And, imagine something like that happening today. Imagine somebody being in the academy today. And, with all that we have going on right now, boom, here you go. Okay, out into the street you go. Like it's a volatile situation. It's really a Molotov cocktail of a situation.
yeah, it was, Mike, and like it was a hotbed. The country,
Yeah.
it's like it is today. The racial divisiveness, the anti-government sentiment, the untrust, the have and have-nots. It's everything that you have today, but it was just this is 50 years ago, Mike. 50,
Yeah.
yeah, 50 years ago. The same scenario. I feel for the young people, but it's just a repeat what's going on today. The difference was that today they're doing things to the police. They're doing things, and they're giving the police a hard time. There's a lack of support, of course, by a lot of people, all sides of the races. A lot of don't like the police attitude today, but there's a lot of support as well. I've seen both sides. But back then, there were groups that were assassinating police officers. Literally, we used to lose a few guys every year, and that did take place. And within a couple of years, I would say that's around 1970. It started in the 60s, but we had the Black Panther Party kick off. Started in out west, and then in Chicago, the original Black Panther group, a splinter group, and then they sort of caught hold. And their thing originally wasn't to hurt police officers, and then it sort of transformed itself, and they got violent
Mhm.
to make more headway, and that caused more uh, divisiveness across the country. When the police departments were on edge, they said, "What's going to happen to America?" People were afraid. The big people who lived in the big cities were terrified, of course, and that sort of went on for a couple of years. And then Joanne Chesimar, and she sort of headed up a splinter group, and they called themselves the Black Liberation Army. That I'm sure, with your smarts, Michael, you know history so well. But the Black Liberation Army was a splinter group headed by Joanne Chesimar, and their one goal in mind was to kill police officers, and they did. They shot at and we had some assassination attempts on my people, and an attempt on the post where I was at. I just went to meal, and the two people, Tom Curry, Nick Benetti, they had got shot in my place because we were watching the DA Hogan's house. He was a DA who was prosecuting some of the Black Panther Party groups. So they targeted me, not directly, just me as a police officer and my partner, but we went for meal, and Tom Curry, Nick Benetti took our spot over there, and then they got machine gunned, and they survived, but they were badly hurt and paralyzed and such. And we came back, and as we came back from our meal period, we pulled up, and I says, "Where are they?" They were right down the block. And they were screaming on the radio. They got shot. And we went down there, and I thought it was a car accident. I was a young kid. At that time I was probably 22, and I thought it was a car accident. Well, the windows were shattered. I says, "It's a car accident." And then the bodies were hanging outside the car, and then I saw the bullet holes in the side of the door, and a big group the size of quarter holes, and a big grouping. And then I says, asked for assistance, an ambulance and such, and I took Nick Benetti in our car, and put him in the back, and took him in another car, took Tom Curry. And then when I was in the back with Nick Benetti, he was really bleeding out, and he was a big guy. I couldn't move him around, and what am I going to do? So I saw the bullet holes in his midsection, and so I put my fingers in the bullet holes, and there was so many. I think he got hit 8 times, and I was trying to cover up the holes, the spread, to try to stop him from bleeding. His eyes were rolling back, and we got him to the hospital, and they brought him back to life. And Tom Curry, the same situation. They brought him back. He was really a dead Tom Curry, but they pumped him up in the ER at St. Luke's Hospital, and they brought him back. So that was my real first experience with police officers getting shot, attempt assassinations and such. And then later on, of course, they tried to kill me. The crime family, the Sicilian, the Gambino family, tried to kill me later on in my career. But so that was young, and for me, that was impressionable, and that laid on my mind, so to speak, at night. Um, and there was a lot of that kind of a thing. A lot of police officers getting shot, a lot of community people getting shot. Was the times became very, very violent. The city was out of control, kind of different than what it is today. But the city, like in the 70s and 80s, was really, it was a place of violence. It was a shame until they really started bringing it under control.
I mean, it's now we've gone a few years without police officers being killed. I mean, every time it happens, obviously, it's a very sad thing. But there was a time last decade where 3-4 years would pass by, not counting cops who have died from illnesses from ground zero, but on duty active cops would not get killed. But you go on the Officer Down Memorial page for the '70s, and outside of 9/11, in which obviously so many died on one day, I mean, 71 through 79, I mean, countless, so many names and so close to each other, in death in terms of when they were killed. And, it was, you mentioned that time. Oh, and actually, before I get to that, quick note on Bonetti and Curry for my audience. They were not, the NYPD, I have to say, did right by them in this sense. They were not retired right away. They were allowed to serve, you can do up until 62 years and a half, I think, on the NYPD. And they did not retire them until 1995, September of 1995. So they stayed the whole way through. Tom Curry passed away. I don't know if it was from that, probably in 2007. I believe Nick Bonetti has since passed away as well. I don't know when he passed away, but
Yeah.
they were able to at least stay on the job in a sense up until the mandatory retirement age, which is a good gesture by the department. But you mentioned that time being a hotbed. And I had this discussion with another friend of mine. I mentioned him quite a bit on this podcast, Don Sadawi, who's a great bomb squad detective. He's not too far from you. I don't know how far from you. He's in North Shore. I don't know how close that is from where you're at, but the bomb squad uh, had a unique vantage point to radical groups as well as at every other cop in the city because there were so many of them. Because it wasn't just the BLA, it wasn't just the Black Panthers. I mean, you're talking about the FALN, the Weather Underground, the New World Liberation Army, so many different domestic groups all in one place, all with different causes, but all achieving the same thing, and that's terrorizing the residents of New York City. So, at the time, once you had a little bit of years under your belt and you have these younger folks that are coming on the job, this is obviously before you became a sergeant, later a lieutenant, just a patrolman who was seasoned, what would you tell the younger guys to make sure they kept their eyes peeled and stayed safe?
Exactly, common sense methods. Keep your head on a swivel, be aware of your surroundings, and be at the ready because it could happen at any time, whether it's a simple stop on the street or car stops are dangerous, family disputes, there's always those kinds of things. But you have to be aware of assassination attempts because you saw, I think it happened in Brooklyn with the two officers got
Yeah.
shot in a parked car in Brooklyn a couple of years back. So those kinds of things, it does rear its head. So when you're at a fixed post, you're having your lunch, as you move around, it was when you pull up to an intersection, don't pull all the way up. Leave yourself a few feet back so you're not side by side with a car. Make sure you're thinking about your safety. You have to think that way, and you have to think about police assassinations. You have to be aware of it. The difference today, which what factor it makes, it does make a difference. Today they have the bulletproof vests. Back in the early and mid 70s, we had no bulletproof vests. Only a handful of guys could afford them, and you bought them for yourself. But that added another layer without bulletproof vests, and then today, well, back then we were sort of less supervision, I should say. So a lot of the guys, we had our 10 card, they called it, I believe, if I remember correctly, and you had all your guns that you owned on that card. And you had to make sure that the police department knew about it. So a lot of the guys, they allowed you to take those guns and bring them to work as a backup gun. and when it was really violent and people had shotguns. We had combat cars. We had 4 cops to a car with a shotgun, and you rode around and backed all the other cops up. You didn't handle the jobs per se. You just went to all the radio runs. You moved around the precinct because as the cops were called to a job, they were set up for possible assassinations. So the combat car always laid back, ready and watching. They pull up a little couple seconds later. So we had those combat cars, which I worked a little bit, but it was the officers then became so well aware of their safety. Always have the gun out on your lap. Don't let people see it. When you get out of the car, you don't take your gun and start pointing it at people or pointing it at drivers. You keep it behind your leg, always hidden. Try to keep it away from public view. You don't want to intimidate people. You don't intimidate drivers or other innocent people in cars and such. But you had your gun without pointing it. It was at the ready. So you learn those tactics, and you always had the guys who were a few years older would tell you, would instruct you when you're making the arrest. You have people against the wall. Okay, now when it comes time to cuff them, there's the difficult time. When you got them against the wall and you're working, you say, hey, one guy maybe has a gun. You got drugs. Maybe the guy does have a gun. You got him with a gun, or maybe he got a group for robbery, 4 or 5 robbers. So now comes the time, get against the wall. You're giving him a toss now because you know you got something. Now comes the time you're going to cuff him. Now get the cuffs on some tough guys, stronger than you, bigger than you, faster than you. So now comes the time to get the cuffs. So I tell the guys, look, what good is it if you got 5 cops there, 4 cops, more, and you all got your guns pointing at them? What good is that going to do, right? One guy with the gun, lay back on an angle, maybe 2. But the other guys have to work the people and have to get those cuffs on. And that's the difficult time. And I saw it the other night it was a sad situation when the female officer, I believe, right, Kim Potter, maybe,
Yes.
took the wrong gun by mistake and such. There was so much talking with that young fella. He felt, I believe, that he was sort of talking his way out of it. And the officers were sort of confused a little bit. There was so much conversation. And what happened was bad guys, tough guys, I don't care, large or small, they can feel how much strength you have in your hands. So when you're trying to cuff somebody, if you're doing it with your fingertips, Mike, you're starting to like that with your fingers, putting the cuffs on, that's not going to work. You have to really hug them, grab them, push them against the car. If you got to get them out of the car, you got to be fast. You got to avoid that, because the more you talk, the longer you let it go, the worse it is. And so you got to get the cuffs on quickly. And it takes 2 guys at least to get the cuffs on one guy. Especially if it's a big guy, he'll start throwing you off like teddy bears.
Yeah.
So it could take more. So now you try it, Mike. I'm not a great big guy. I don't think you're a big guy,
I'm not.
No. We're not like Bill Cannon and Mark Tomato over there, those 6'5" guys. So, and even so big as you got to take control of the situation, get them cuffed. I used to explain that to the young guys. So when I used to hold little drills and such, come on, let's line up. Let's see. I'm going to grab you by the arm and I'm going to escort you. See if you can break away. Of course, you just break away. You run. So you really have to grab the people tight. You have to get the cuffs on. And the big rule that I'm talking about back in the day when there were no cameras, less supervision. We had respect for where you worked. Respect for, I don't care which community it was, but you had to respect the people who were watching. They're watching you. Mm. They're going to boo you. So they can do more than that. So you got to sort of, when he's cuffed, it's done. The extra tap on the head does nothing. It accomplishes nothing. So you get him cuffed, be fast. get him in the car quick before he doesn't even know, he's not aware of it, in the car and gone, and take him off the scene. So because not to brag or anything, but I was just in so many different arrest teams in my time on the job. That's all I did, no matter what rank I was. So thousands of situations, and I learned how to do it quickly, the best you can. Now it's ugly a lot of times, because people don't want to get arrested, but the faster you do it, the better it is, to avoid the Panther look, buddy standing around and dancing with him and talking with him, and here's the Panther, well, I'm going to take charge because he was a doer, he was a tough anti-crime guy, right? So he grabbed him and put him down. But you got to do quick, stand him up and get him in the car. And that was I don't want to talk, because that trial is still pending now, with the Chauvin trial there, and that's another whole issue.
Yeah.
Because it's supervision. And supervision, they could talk, well, he. No, where was the sergeant lieutenant? I don't want to hear you on the stand later on. Well, the cop was wrong. No, where was the sergeant? Where was the lieutenant? A good CO, captain of a precinct, would say, I want you there on every job. You hear something's going on, you get your ass there, man. You go. You better be there. And the thing was, and I had some good, tough captain COs, commanders of precincts, and different details, and even when I was a force, and they would tell you, it's the sergeant's fault. It's the lieutenant's fault. They were there. They were on the street. Don't let it happen. So if a cop gets in trouble, and if it's a situation, a lot of the times a sergeant, lieutenant, and supervision could correct the situation and say, no, let's go. Because a lot of times an officer, when you start rolling around the streets and things happen, they go into a haze or a little bit of a shock, and they, sometimes, when you need, so you really, and maybe another cop, because maybe he's a senior cop and you're a younger cop, but a boss on the scene, let's go. You don't, up, out, in the car, right? I don't care. We lie him sideways, lie him on the back seat. Well, let's get him out of there. And that solves 90% of it. So quick, strength, respectful the best you can, but get out of there. Get the cars out. Nobody left behind. Quick, before the community, and today they got the cameras. Yeah. And a lot of, and the guys are getting themselves involved for minutes and minutes and minutes, to like situations, so much talking and this and that. When you make it in your mind that somebody has to go, get arrested, you got to do it fast, with strength, and the best to your ability, and get out. Get back in that station house as quick as you can.
It's interesting because, and we're talking with retired NYPD Lieutenant and author Peter Pranzo here in the Mike the podcast. You're the third guy that's told me that. First guy that told me that was Scott Wagner when he was on, and and very good guy. And he'll be on again soon to break down a case that he worked in the 90s. And he was telling me when he was on, whatever you have to do to get the cuffs on, okay. But once the cuffs on, fight's over. The fight's over. Whatever happened before that, okay. Now you have him on, as you said, get him on there. And Chief Anamone said the same thing when he was on. Once you get him on, that is it. That's what he was taught. That's it. And anything else that comes after that is just, as you said, it definitely is unnecessary. And it leads to not just the potential for the community to be there. And I know you're familiar with the term airmail. A lot of cops used to get that back in the day, but also, it leads to potential for people to get hurt. The cops and the person that's got to be arrested alike. And nobody wants that. So I'll ask you this, and this is a question that if you're familiar with the show, which I know you are, I ask it to every person that I have on from the civil service field, and that is not considering your encounters with the BLA and later the Mafia, which we'll talk about as we go, but just in general, day-to-day cop duties, especially during that time. What's one of the more dangerous encounters that you can remember where at the end of it, you were just really glad you didn't get hurt?
I guess one of the shootings, we had a few shootings, Mike, but one of them I went in with and I had a diverse team, narcotics team, because that was the only way we could get it to work in Central Harlem. And we were one of the original successful diverse teams in New York City history, and nicknamed the Harlem Raiders. But I had 4 black cops, and I had 3 white cops, 1 Spanish cop, and me, an Italian kid. and I was a young sergeant, and these guys were really tough, seasoned guys, and we sort of played off on each other, and a couple of the black guys kept things in balance, and the white guys, back and forth. So we were very respectful of the community while we took thousands of people off the street, and it wasn't easy. We went into one of the buildings. We were hitting one of the drug buildings, was a abandoned building, and we make some observations. We know they're in the building. They're doing drugs in the building. So we pull up with a few cars, get out, and a couple guys on one side, a couple guys on the other side, and myself and Bobby Smith, a black officer, a hero, saved my life, and then I repaid him back for it. We went into the building and we chased a couple of them, and the one guy turns as he jumps out into the alley from the back door into the alleyway, and he lets off a few rounds at us and Bobby Smith, my guy, tough guy. He shot about 4 or 5 shots back at him, and I was behind him. I couldn't get any shots off, but nobody was hit. All the stuff coming off the walls and ceiling and such, and then the chase ensued, and they went to a schoolyard, and I went up to the corner. They had them off at the corner, and I went up the other street and made a turn, and I was ahead of them. And here they came around the turn, and I knew my guy was low on ammo. Bobby was down on it, and this guy had a few shots left, and he turned and was going to shoot my guy in the head, Bobby Smith. And I took aim and I let off 4 rounds, and I hit the guy, and he went down. And me and Bobby were on the street, and we were like, really, ah, Bobby. Yeah, we looked at each other and grabbed each other, and so that was a day that we would just why we didn't die, and that kind of a thing. And this guy didn't die, but he was all dusted up, drug dealer, and so that was that. That was one of the closer calls. There were a bunch of others, but we both got the combat course out of that on Medal Day ceremony from the NYPD. It turned out to be a good arrest. The guy was wanted and such, and everything else. But we were lucky. At the end of the day, we hugged again at the end of the day down in the locker room, and hey, Bobby, we're alive. We're effing alive. You believe this, and that kind of a thing. So those kind of situations, we had a few of them, quite a few, and that was one of them.
That's an adrenaline. That's an adrenaline pumper. I mean, that's something like that. I mean, in the moment, of course, as I said, the adrenaline's pumping, your heart's racing. You don't really think about it, but it's afterwards, especially as the years go by, that you just say to yourself, especially once you retire and you're able to just be a normal citizen again. Wow, I can't believe I survived that, because especially during that time when drugs were all the rage. Now it's different, because I think I don't want to say they've gotten smarter, because I think if you're still going out there committing crimes, you're not making great life decisions. You're not a very smart person in that regard. But I think people know, like I'm based in New Haven, Connecticut, as you know. I remember hearing a few years ago in my criminal justice class, somebody came in to speak, and this person dealt with getting kids that were young gang members off the streets and helping them improve their lives. That these kids had a rule: don't shoot at the police, because not because of any kind of respect per se, but because they knew if they, at the very minimum, injured the cop, or if they killed the cop, then it was going to be a hefty jail sentence. You're already in it. It's bad enough that you're out there making poor decisions and committing crimes. You don't want to add a capital charge to the list. But back then, I guess people, as you said, as you kind of touched on earlier, people don't really care about that sort of a thing. So I want to accelerate ahead to your time in the 7-1, which was, I believe, in the do or die Bed-Stuy section of Brooklyn, as they call it, the do or die Bed-Stuy section. So this is a minority neighborhood. You mentioned the Harlem Raiders, consisting of, which we'll talk more about in depth as we go, really a mixed group of guys from different backgrounds. But, you're coming in as an Italian guy to a largely minority neighborhood. What was the key for you in terms of getting the innocent people, the good people of that community, to trust you?
Doing exactly what you would think common sense would be. It's yes, sir, yes, ma'am, you know, and everybody. So when you did a car stop, it's not, let me see your license. You learn from the older guys. And years back when I was young, I learned right away, sir, can I see your license, registration, insurance card, please? You know, and it says, you went to a red light. You let them know up front what's going on. What's the situation here? So you do it respectfully. That's the big deal. And you respect everybody in the community. And they'll look at you And they'll look at you, wow, it says, okay, officer, and they will 100%. But if you come off with somebody who's not under arrest, or it's a community person, and when you show compassion, especially, you're in a precarious position, you're a white person, this is not you don't live there. This is not your community. You're invited there as a worker. You're there to protect and to serve. It's not to just shoot them up, that kind of a thing. You're not going in with the situation. And when we first get to these kinds of precincts, the older people will tell you, and I told the younger guys as I got more time on the job, you're in here to serve and protect. You have to go with the mindset that they're not the enemy because they're Spanish, because they're black, because they're Hasidic Jews, or because they're white. And everybody has to, I guess they have the same training at the academy. The little that we had, the big thing they told us, I says, leave all your racial feelings, and we all come with them. We all had them, we grew up. Leave it at the door, because when you come into this job for the next 20 years or whatever you're going to work, leave it at the door. You're here, you're blue, and you're there. You got to remember, you're there to serve the community. So that was the thing. And when I went into the community, I didn't care where I worked. See, I was a different kind of guy, maybe my personality and stuff. Now I was a tough kid, and I took as many people as I had to with the arrest. But I sort of, when I had good people, and when you handle a car accident, when you handle a child who got hurt, when you an aided case, a person who was a victim of a crime, a sexual crime, or whatever, a woman, you really have to extend yourself, get on those hands and knees and help the people pick them up. I used to put the women in the radio cars. I used to put children in it. I'm going to wait for an ambulance. I got a child who's bleeding. I'm going to, no, get in that car. I don't care what the job says, you call, no. I used to take especially the children, the small kids, and I saw a child beating. No, come on, ma'am, come with your boy. Get in the car, we'll go into the hospital. 30 seconds, 1 minute, the city's got so many hospitals, no matter where you work, I took them. So by doing that, you don't realize how many people watch you. They say, wow, no, the cops did the right thing. And then they'll give you an allowance for when you got to take somebody and push them against the wall and pull out a gun or some glassines of heroin. Then they say, okay, no, I know that officer. I've seen him before. This guy is a straight shooter and he's doing the right thing. So you got to sort of put it in your mindset that you're there by their invite. The police department put you there, but you're working for them. And when I used to go to the community meetings later on, and I says, I'm here because you asked us to be here. I'm here to help you. I am you. And all my guys, and I used to line up my black, Hispanic, and white guys, big tough guys, and it says, we're here, we're working for you. So you tell us where the gun guys are, where the drugs are, where the robbers are, because how are we going to find out where? You can't. Next thing you know, especially when I had my teams, they gave me all the anonymous slips of paper at the community meetings. This guy, people can't leave their house. This guy, he's shaking down everybody. He's a drug dealer. He's a junkie himself, and he's taking over the block. He's a bully. He carries a gun. Okay, good. Thank you very much. I mean, get in the car, guys. Let's go. We're going for this guy, right? He's a big guy. He always wears a baseball cap and so on. So I don't care what color he is. I don't care what ethnic background. He's going tonight. Sure enough, there he is. Based upon that anonymous call, which says the guy with the baseball cap is carrying a gun. At least he's going to get stopped. And we get the gun. And the people say, whoa. They love it. They love the response to the police, that they feel they have some control over the police because the police work for them in that community. And then you build up that police community rapport. You don't want to be riding up and down the street and become distant to the community. That's a ticket to failure.
Yeah, and you wonder if that's the case now. I mean, we'll have to see as what happens as time goes along, which is why being involved in the community is so important. Because Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, once described his ownership as this, and that is, and it's of course a different thing, but it's kind of applicable in a moment, as you'll see in a moment, and that he called his ownership of the Patriots, he's the gatekeeper of a public trust. And similarly speaking, police officers in a given community are the gatekeepers of a public trust, along with the members of those communities, because you want, as you said, to protect those communities and make sure those communities stay pristine, and the quality of life does not go down, that people can live and enjoy their neighborhoods freely. And that trust is a great thing, because I go back to my interview with Chief Anamone. When CompStat came into play in the 90s, the main thing about that was, as I'm sure you experienced firsthand pre-CompStat, cut through the red tape, whatever intelligence you have act on it, and whatever good you see you can do, well, who cares about what the rule book says? As you said, common sense policing. And that's a beautiful thing, because it goes to show that there is a way to cut through that divide and show that, as you and I have discussed in the Police Off the Cuff live chats before, the person that is wearing that badge, is every person that wears a badge a good person? Unfortunately not. But most of the times, 99.9% of the time, the person that's wearing that badge is a human being that bleeds, that cares, and wants to help. No matter where they are, they want to help that community. So accelerating ahead, I mean, you talked about it. The 3-2 was besieged by, well, actually, what, the 7-1, you had your time in the 7-1. Let me accelerate ahead to when you got to the 3-2, rather. So you helped out in the 7-1, and I'm sure the neighborhood was grateful to have you there. And now you're going to the 3-2, which, you get promoted to sergeant, and you're heading there for really an undertaking that is quite the challenge, because it's the most violent precinct in the city. This is still a pretty violent time in the city. And you mentioned getting drug dealers off the street, so they could use that now in the 3-2. When you were first assigned there, it was interesting because it had to do with the issues that were going on between the city and the police department at the time. Why don't you take us through that for my audience that doesn't know?
Yeah, what happened was there was a racial divide. The Mafia, just to give a quick background about the heroin situation, if I can, I might take up
Mm-hmm.
about
Oh,
a
please
minute.
do.
Yeah, what happened was when the Mafia got involved in the drug business, it was really into the late 60s and early 70s. They began to get the gambling was doing okay, but not great gambling money. They found out they could make more money with the selling heroin. Long story short, so you had a few crime families, two, three, four crime families who got Sicilian mafia, who got involved in the drug business because there was no way of the average drug dealer to get the drugs, the raw heroin, the opiate, from the hills of Turkey. So the mafia had their people go from Palermo, Italy, over to Turkey, and work the farmers, control the farmers, and have them farm the poppy fields, cut off the poppy sacks, and that was the raw morphine, the opiate in there, the gummy material. And they would take that and they would put it into big bushels and bags of burlap bags, and they put them on a train or the trucks. And from the hills of Turkey, they bring it down to the port of Mersin in Turkey, and they put it on a boat and ship it over to Palermo, Italy, Sicily. And from there, they truck it up into the hills of Sicily, and they have the refineries where they would cook up the opiate and get it down to raw heroin, and then put it into 2 pound kilos, 2 pound weights, keys of heroin. And then from there, they put it on the olive boats and ship it to America. And the olive boat would wind up at the Fulton Fish Market, it was really a mob controlled thing back in the 70s. So they'd bring it by olive boat to smaller boats and then ship it into the Fulton Fish Market. From there, they would take it by trucks with the fish and with the thing. They take it up to the Bronx, and then when it went to the Bronx, they had lots of Puerto Ricans up in usually the 4-1 precinct, in the South Bronx, and they had a lot of Puerto Ricans working midnights, and they had all the windows painted over up in these high-rise, a few-story buildings. and they would take the heroin and mix it with a little lactose. There was no fentanyl at the time, and they took the heroin, put it into dime bags like the size of a stamp bag, and they'd take it with a little lactose, and they put the glassine and packaged them into bundles of 25 each, into quarter bags, bigger ones, and those were $25, and they'd wrap it all up. Then before the sun came up, they would ship that heroin all ready to go to Harlem. And Central Harlem, the 3-2 was the central point. And by morning, uh, it was stocked and ready to go. And thousands of people would come from all over the East Coast, especially, go into Harlem and buy their heroin, take it back home or shoot up there, and they'd beat it down a little bit, take it back and lighten up the hit so they could sell it in their communities, you know. And that was essentially controlled by a few mafia families. Gambino was one who put up the money back in the day. But what happened was it began to take hold. So by the time the mid 70s came, I got there in like 76, 77 into the 3-2. It was really out of control. Homicides, there were bodies all over the streets. They would shoot up for territory because who wanted this street, who wanted that street, because the mafia didn't give a crap. All they wanted to do was load up the community with heroin, and they would pay for it. Nicky Barnes people and a few others would control a lot of it until he got arrested, and then it was wide open. And there was a lot of bloodshed there as they would fight over the territory. But it was a multi-million dollar operation. It was figured at one time on each street was $13 million a week in sales on each street, a few avenues. So the money was just over the top. And so and became a very, very violent area. The heroin, there were overdoses. People were very sick. Harlem Hospital couldn't handle it. It was like, you know, just thousands of zombies walking around the street, passing out and overdosing. On the rooftops, you had people of all ethnic backgrounds from all over the area, children, and it was just terrible. White people, black people, Spanish. You had all walk nurses. I mean, I don't want to say firemen and cops, but there were always, you know, correction officers. It was people from all walks of life who became hooked on the heroin, and it was a terrible, terrible situation. So when I got to the 3-2, there was another boss who just got there, and he said, Pete, we're going to change this. And I got there, then he got there, and he said, Pete, because I had some activity and I was an active guy. I made a lot of arrests and a few medals and stuff like that. I was a young sergeant. I was a tough kid. And so he says, pick a team. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's get a diverse team up. And we did. And we came up with the team and nicknamed later on, not right away. It was, you know, it was just a task force, narcotics task force and expeditions car and stuff. And then we got together and we went out. And the first thing we did, and he told me the same thing, meet with the community leaders. And I met with one famous community leader. She since passed away, Rita Webb Smith. And she was the top-notch community leader in New York City. So, and her boy got shot, and she had some family situations, kids getting involved. But when the boy got shot, it was a bad thing, and so she demonstrated at the precincts, carrying the signs, "Police help us, police help us." So the CO grabs me. He says, "Take care of that. Meet with her," and we did. We met with her and a few other community leaders, and then we started building up a repertoire of who the drug dealers were and such. And we went out and we started just killing it. We started making a lot of arrests, a lot of cleaning out the buildings, the abandoned buildings, blocking off the streets, taking all the the possessions, and taking the junkies, the addicts. And we took them, sent them to Harlem Hospital, the ones who were really sick. Some of them had to get arrested for possession. Others went to Harlem Hospital until they were overworked. But we just kept at it, and we made a great, we established a great rapport with the community. They loved us, and we were in the newspapers with them, and our names were all over the place, and we made a little bit of history. and we were brothers. We stand together and stuff like that. We were cool guys, tough guys, but we accomplished something, and we were very, very proud of it.
Ultimately, because it goes back to what we kind of talked about earlier, nobody wants to see a community decay. Even now, even what we're seeing right now, and even with the stances that some people have on narcotics, I have an uncle that I never met because of narcotics. He died of an overdose 9 years before I was born. It's a and the stories my mom always tells me about him is that, so it's her uncle as well, is that she would see the pain that my her late grandmother, my late great grandmother would have to go through. And that was the pain of so many families in that area, to where, is every situation going to come out perfect? No, some people unfortunately just cannot get the help for this sort of a thing because the tendency is too strong, and they die as a result. But there's also a lot of lives that are saved. There's also a lot of lives that have an opportunity now to change for the better, because it's not the fact that you're just taking the narcotics off the streets in and of itself. It's the people that are dealing the narcotics too, that are very dangerous, that are very violent, that, as you said, are fighting for territory. And I remember the NYPD posting a marijuana bust they did last summer on Twitter. And as you know, social media is a cesspool these days. People were really, really mad in the comments, pig this, pig that. And I'm thinking to myself, well, it's not the fact that they got this. It's not the fact that they took the product itself off of the streets. The fact that the person that was dealing that product in the streets probably a really dangerous person, and now they can't hurt that community anymore. It's not always like we see in the movies, the hippies that are prancing around. And these are dangerous people that mean serious business. So yeah, it's a great thing, and it goes to show what happens when the community and the police work together. Quick note on the mafia, though, because it's funny that you mentioned that. Drug dealing really created some infighting within the five families, because the old time mobsters didn't want, Paul Castellano, chief among them, they didn't want these guys dealing because of the hefty jail sentence that it carried. And that was one of the things that, if any of you are listening out there and you know the story of John Gotti, that was one of the things that kind of kickstarted his feud with Castellano, that culminated with Gotti killing him, or not killing him directly, but ordering his assassination outside of Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan in 1985. So, we'll dive into that time now, working with the community activists, Rita Webb Smith, and of course Harlem Raiders and the Gambinos. They are not happy that you're taking out their drug trade, and from their perspective, even though it's an evil perspective, playing devil's advocate, you understand, because for them, they're cold. They don't care about people. They only care about the money. So as far as they're concerned, this is business, and business is suffering. And so they put a hit out on you. Originally, you're no stranger to being targeted, unfortunately. I mean, BLA targeted you for a machine gun murder. There was a bounty on your head from them. Now the mafia is coming after you. And this is different, because is the mafia evil? Yeah. But they're a little bit more structured, if you will, not to give them too much credit. And these radical groups are, in that, as I mentioned earlier with the street gangs here in New Haven, they know not to target the police. They genuinely stay away, or generally, I should say, stay away from innocent civilians and the police. But they made an exception for you. When did you first hear that they were marking you for death?
Probably 6 months after we started, because at the beginning we made such a big dent. Because then it graduated down lower and lower and lower. When we first started, man, we made a few thousand arrests the first year, and this precinct was only 1 square mile. Now you divide up the 1 square mile into like maybe 5 or 6 hot zones, drug dealing zones, and so taking that amount of people from the streets and all the buyers from all ethnic backgrounds, taking them in. So we knew we were hurting them. So the intelligence unit, which at the time it was good, the calls would come in, and I would get paperwork on it. I still have the old reports and such that they were targeting me and my guys, but essentially me, because I was the leader, and but on the intelligence unit, when they give me look, Sergeant Pranzo, we got to tell you, So if you want some time off and you want to get out of the unit a little bit, you want to close down the unit a little bit for a while, take a breather and cool things down. You have a family and such. I said, no way. I said, no, these guys are so pumped. these guys are pumped. You can't pull the plug on them in midway. We were hitting them hard. So he says, F them. He said, but look. So because the sergeant says, hey, look. I'm telling you honest, Sarge. You're a young guy, but I'm telling you from experience. If these guys want to kill you, they could kill you, because it was an open contract. They means it was like $35,000. I thought it was worth more than them, but I guess the money back then was worth some money, right? So
Had to be.
35 grand, that's what I'm worth. But they even had it on me. They had it on Rita Webb Smith, the community leader. They tried to kill her. They firebombed her house and such things like that. So and somebody was on a rooftop, and we had an informant on the rooftop who was with him, the guy with the rifle, who was he had me in his line of sight, and he didn't pull the trigger, but he says, "See how easy I can kill the Sarge," So what happened was it was an open contract, which means that anybody at any time could prove that they killed me. We get the $35,000 put up by Carlos Gambino, and all that came down in the paperwork and such. And they gave me a radio to take home, and the Suffolk County PD out where I live gave special attention to my house and the kids and all that stuff. And so it was a little nerve wracking, but in the heat of the moment, we used to make fun in the street that wouldn't get near me, my guys. They would circle around. No, don't get near Sergeant Pete, And so we were so tough at the time, and we blew these things off, and shots would come off the roofs, but not just at us, but shots were always pinging and panging off the cars and things. You would hear it. So they were always taking shots at police, at community people at random, and so you had to be a little on edge. You couldn't hang out like we talk about staying at a location. Stuff comes off the roof, so we're in with the bad guys here. So you got to do the arrest, get them out of there, load them onto the paddy wagon, load them into the radio cars. I mean, we were so fast with the searches. I'm telling you, Mike, within 2 minutes, we could take 30 or 40 people off the street or off a building. We were gone. Mm-hmm. Like we were never there. Like, say, what? People wouldn't know what happened. What do you mean Sergeant Pranzo was here? And the building could be cleaned out. And I hooked up with quick thing. I hooked up with the New York City Housing and Preservation Authority. And they were down in the 2-5 precinct, a little lower on the east side, still part of Harlem. And I hooked up with a good fellow over there, and he ran that division of the New York City. And he gave me the big pullout of all the city-owned buildings and the ones that were supposed to be vacant, abandoned. So that gave me the right and permission to go into those buildings and get in there. People said, Pete, but what right? There's no warrants. I said, no, it's an abandoned building. And here's the paperwork.
You don't need one.
Nope. And right on the report, it would say by a permission authority to Housing Preservation, New York City, and they gave us the right to enter these buildings, take down the doors, and clean them out, take all the drug dealers out. And we come up with guns, of course, and a lot of drug dealers and heavyweight narcotics, bundles and bundles of cash and money, guns, the whole 9 yards. And little by little, we cleaned up the damn precinct. That in 1984, on the street, Mayor Koch was there, and the commissioner, and Rita Webb Smith, and I was on the street. They opened up the street officially. It was beautiful. They redid the housing preservation, redid all the buildings, all the fascia on it. It came out actually beautiful. And if you go to Harlem today, it's a different Harlem. It looks pretty damn nice. I'd go back from time to time to see the people. And it came out well. And we opened up the street. They had the ribbon cutting ceremony. And it was a nice feeling that we had a little bit of a part to play with it. I says, wow. When I took Rochelle in a couple of times, my wife Rochelle, and we took her in because Rita Webb Smith, before she passed away, she wrote a book that I helped with the book and such. And I'm in her book as well, and it was the woman who took back the street, her street. And it was a story, exactly her story about what her family went through and how she worked with the police. And we accomplished something. We felt good about ourselves,
Of course, and I was smiling because, when you were telling that story, I'm like, that is proactive policing. You don't see a lot of that anymore. And I don't know what it's a product of. It's well, several different things that we've kind of talked about throughout the show. But that, I mean, that you talked about common sense earlier. I go back to that because that's just so smart. Like, it's so out of the box, but it worked because I would have never thought of that. Oh, you go into a building and you never know what's waiting for you there, obviously, to begin with. But I never knew that an empty building wouldn't require a warrant of some kind because nobody owns it. Therefore, there's no need to let anybody know. It makes sense once you explain it. But at the time, just the ingenuity to go get that paperwork. I mean, that was just so clever. And I mean, I guess it goes to show that if you're going to work in the criminal justice field, not just on a local police force, rather big or small, but any level, FBI, ATF, DEA, whatever the case may be, you've got to be one step ahead of the bad guys. And that shows that you were like 3 steps ahead of them, something like that, because that was really, really clever. So, 1986, at this point, you make lieutenant and you got 18 years on the job. You're close to that pension and you'd stay through 89. And then the opportunity to join street crime comes through. And before we get to street crime, I have to say the motto of street crime because I love it. Street crime, we own the night. It's just such a great, great motto. It's right up there with ESU's motto. And they're not around anymore. I believe they were done away with in 2002 when Ray Kelly came back as commissioner. But at the time, I mean, nobody can deny the impact that they made. Small group compared to other units, but an active group. And you work with some great guys. One of them's a mutual friend of ours. I know he'll be watching tonight. I hope he'll be watching tonight. That's Bill Ryan, who went on to do great things. So
He's the
take me
best,
through.
Billy Ryan. He's a
Great guy, great career. And
good. He was a young kid. He
yeah,
was a young. I think he was 25.
at the
And what a
time,
young tough kid he was, Billy. Oh God. And
yeah, terrific guy.
first grade detective. Great. He did very well. God
Oh,
bless.
of course, he did it. He did, and shout out to him if he watches tonight
Yes,
when
Billy.
it premieres. So take me through, basically getting the street crime and taking these young, amped up guys and gals under your wing and showing them the ropes as they sought to make their own impact in a positive way on crime in New York City and get it down.
Yeah, Mike. I got promoted into lieutenant in '84. Had to do a short stint in the 103 in Queens for a bit, and then it got to street crime in 1985, where I met Billy. I think '85 or '86, but I got there in '85, and they gave me about 40 young people who they just enlarged the unit, and we did a special like 10 p.m. to maybe 6 a.m. in the morning or something like that. But we worked overnight and we did looking for robberies. And I had all these young people they gave me who also were new into the unit. And I sort of had to walk them through the aggressive patrol, how to stay out of trouble, how to be aggressive on the street because these young guys, maybe they weren't experienced enough like the older street crime guys, of which I worked with a lot of them later on. So I was training the younger people for about, I think it's about 6 months over the summer because it was a busy robbery summer. And I took them all over the city and mostly in Midtown. And I had to explain to them about being aggressive patrol, doing aggressive patrol without hurting people, without ruffling feathers, without getting yourself into trouble, without overstepping your boundaries, and how to look for people with a gun and see the hitch, how they walk, see a bulge on the side. It's almost impossible, as most gun carriers would tell you, not to adjust your gun after a few minutes. You're always playing and adjusting your gun. So you'll see that. But if you see a gun, that's a different story. But then that's a direct arrest. If you see a gun, you go there, you got to stop. You're good to do a frisk. And that's where the confusion lies. And I used to teach that, Mike. And I used to put aggressive patrol to non-aggressive patrol. Because if you wait and ride around those streets and you're waiting for a street robbery to take place in front of your eyes, it's not going to happen.
Right.
You're not going to see a bank stick up. You're not going to see a murder in front of your eyes. Not enough. This is not a. So you got to keep your eyes open and look for the bad guys before it happens. So I used to explain to them what to look for, what makes a perp, and he's staring and he's this and that, and or walks away and watch where his hands go because he could be dumping a gun. So if you see something suspicious enough, and that would call for a stop, and you get out without hurting anybody. You be as careful as you can. How are you, bud? Well, I'm here talking. Identify yourself. They see your shield, your badge hanging around your neck. They say, I'm so-and-so. How are you? I want to ask you some questions because you don't want to spook him where that he's going to run on you no matter what he's doing. I just want to ask you a couple of questions and you're on the way. So you got to lie a little bit.
Mhm.
And, okay, what's going on over here? I saw you looking this way and that way. Everything all right? Oh, yeah, officer, you're not going to toss him or nothing like that, right?
Mhm.
You're going to watch him a little bit. Now, if you do see a bulge and you believe, and this is where it's the stop, question, and frisk. If you don't like the answers and you fear for your safety, so at this point, you're not looking for stolen property. You're not looking for narcotics unless you saw a bundle of narcotics. What you're looking for is something where you're going to protect yourself. And that's what that frisk comes to be.
Yeah.
You're looking for the knife or the gun, especially the gun. So if you see the butt of a gun, if you see the bulge, if you see him shying away from you like he's going to dump it, then you have the right to frisk. And that gives you the outer pat down. And that's the stop, question, and frisk. And when you pat him down, you feel, you feel that gun butt, now comes the toss. You got him. Don't move. You really got to be strong with him and make sure he's not a cop. He's not an undercover, because those things happen.
Yeah.
You got to watch out, because the big rule was a lot of black guys don't want to work and Spanish guys don't want to work plain clothes. They don't want to do the undercover work because they wind up getting hurt by other police officers. And it's happened in the past.
Yeah.
You know that, right, Mike? Okay, so you get him, and that's the stop, question, and frisk. You got him, you got your gun. If not, or whatever, you make out that stop, question, and frisk report, send it in, throw it at the local precinct, and he's either on his way or you got your gun arrest. And you take him in and you got your gun. So you do that, and you just got to be professional as you can, as strong as you can. And if you got the guy wrong, I says, okay, my friend, you're on your way. Sorry to bother you tonight, but we're here because you see this community here. They want us here. That's why you give them a quick explanation. Don't just kick them and throw them to the curb. So you
All right, get out of here.
Yeah, right. You try to leave them happier than when you first met them. And
Yeah, of course.
But if you got him, you friggin' got him, and you got to be a tough guy. You got to grab him, you got to yank him. You put him in the car, quick, bang, 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 gun, so and so, good, nice search in the back of the car, and you're gone. And you do it very quickly. If you got a few guys like that, and that's aggressive patrol, having your eyes open, and then responding to radio runs the same way. So these are the kinds of things I was teaching the young police officers, people on their way to become detective, or some detectives as well. You sort of train them. And I used to take them out. Come on, let's do it this way. Don't
Right.
show to each other. I used to explain to them. And I really never had any female officers before, but we had some female officers in the group. And I sort of don't show off to the female officers. Vice versa. Female officers, don't become over aggressive trying to show you're tough and start pushing people around. Be cool. Work together like a good team, like a unit, break them up into 2-man teams and 4-man teams. So that was the essence, teaching these young people how to become aggressive. And all of a sudden, they're making gun collars. They got the hang of it, and trying to stay out of trouble is a big deal.
Right. Yeah. Because ultimately, that's the thing, especially, and I can attest to this. Not that I've ever been a cop, obviously, but as guys, as young men, anything that we have to do that's kind of hard labor or requires a certain amount of activity, like for me, construction work and that a little bit in the past. We get amped up for it just naturally. I think it's kind of like it can go from being, can I say this in a humorous fashion, having good intentions originally, to just being a cowboy basically. And you don't want that. Like that was the complaint originally after what happened in the late 90s with Diallo and the street crime unit, or certain officers from the unit, that, you guys have turned, meaning the upper brass at 1PP, you guys have turned this unit into cowboys. And it's not that the whole unit acted like cowboys. It's unfortunately those particular officers kind of did. But, you want to advise against that because, again, as a boss, you have, sometimes a cop's own worst enemy can be himself or herself. And it's a tough job, and you see so much. And anybody that works in emergency services can attest to that. That it's something that you really have to keep an eye out on. as a boss. And I do want to talk about, helping other officers for a second. We'll get to your retirement in a moment. We're talking with retired NYPD Lieutenant Peter Pranzo, as well as an author of his book, which I have right here. Harlem Raiders is one that you can definitely purchase. I'm reading it so far. I love it. There's 51 chapters in total, but they're not lengthy chapters. If you're the kind of person that doesn't like to read too much, they're very short chapters. So believe me, if you do like to read like me, you'll breeze through this book. It's a great read. And also his other book that he wrote, which we'll discuss momentarily, Behind the Shield: Journey Through the NYPD. So you've put in a really big emphasis on helping officers in crisis. And the NYPD has gotten a bit better in rolling out mental health initiatives. We just saw, unfortunately, a deputy inspector that was going through the effects of a divorce commit suicide. And we've seen in 2019 was particularly horrific. 10 officers from the department committed suicide. And you're with that gun. You take that gun home with you, and you, again, as I just talked about, anybody that's worked as an EMT in the fire department, a dispatcher, even all the stuff you have to hear, police officer, you see a lot. And it's important to have a good support system, to have things that can take the stress away. You got a great wife. I'm sure your kids were great too in that regard. But unfortunately, sometimes we see these members of the service, they can't take the pain anymore, and they take their own lives. So how important was it for you, especially with the friends that you've lost along the way, to really tell the NYPD, hey, you've got to get better at this because we can't afford to lose any more people?
Yeah, Mike, what happened was, we being on the job for so long and working in so many places, and you know so many different people. They come and go throughout your life and your career. And we lost usually, almost always, to suicide. If we lost 10 cops to getting killed in the line of duty, we would lose 12 to suicide. So, and I knew there was a problem with it. And I began writing for the papers, police magazines and such around the country. I did an article for the Daily News and stuff like that. I began writing, before I left the job, I began writing about stress management and suicide prevention before I left the job, as soon as I made lieutenant, because I lost a couple of good friends, really good friends. And I wrote articles, and I would write for one magazine, and I would take that. I had the ability to send it to like 12 or 14 different magazines around the country. So they were all using my articles on stress management and suicide prevention, common denominator being the gun, the accessibility to the gun. But the stress of the job, peer pressure, job pressure, problems at home, divorces, drinking. So it's the myriad of problems that would come with everybody in life. You yourself, we all have these stress problems in our social lives, our family lives, as you go through sickness, a death in the family, a separation. So these things are the difference with a police officer or a military person is the accessibility to the gun. So when you don't feel good, the gun, you have it out every day. You hand it, it's out, you're working. And so it makes it that much easier for a human being to take his own life, her own life, a lot of females as well. So, and that's what was happening. And so I started writing about it, ruffled a few feathers in the department, and they came out with some posters they put around all around the precincts, reach out for help. They started more peer counseling. They started advertising about it, which at least I got them to do something, not just me. I don't want to take credit for it. So please, but there was a lot of other people and the line organizations, PBA, LBA, the CEA, the bosses and such. So the articles really took hold, and they started these different programs, and not, like I said, not just because of me, but and then Gould, I don't know if you remember Gould Publications, they made all the law books. Yeah, Gould was a big law book company. All the lawyers and police had all these books. They asked me to write a book, and I wrote the book back there, Stress Management for Law Enforcement. And that book came out in like 1999, and it made a big splash because what I did is I highlighted all the stress factors, combat fatigue and such like that. And that was one of the big things I focused on because a lot of the active guys who were in these combat teams, like one of my units and such like that, like street crime, became very violent on the job, at home. And I saw that in myself too as well when I was working. You become very violent. You become a violent person. So you got to be able to control that. And along with that, there comes some mental anguish, uh, sleepless nights, trouble on the job. I'm in trouble, this or that. Things go wrong. And so I wrote the book, and it did very well, the book. And the FBI, because I put them in the book, their program, their mental health program, along with all the other police departments in the country, the major ones, and it went into the FBI library, and it was like required reading for the young FBI recruits. And it did very, very well, the book. So that was one of the first ones. And then when I did my story, Behind the Shield, the journey through the NYPD, I covered that in there as well. Family situations. What I went through as a young cop, and I never saw a lot of death because I just had a regular childhood, nothing. I didn't come from a violent neighborhood where I saw death all over the streets. So to me, it was a new thing. And so for me to handle the so much death surrounded by jumpers, suicides, people getting killed by police officers, police suicides. So you day in, day out, that does bother you. Yeah. So death did, I felt it. I absorbed that. You learn to live with it back then and go on with your business. But you always have that little touch of PTSD, PTSD. You get a little bit of that, and most cops go through the job. They have that little touch of it when they get out. So that, to me, it was should be the focus of the job. They do the best they can, but it's almost impossible to eliminate all of it. Mike, it's not an easy thing. If I could just bring up one quick situation which really hurt us. Yeah, we were in the 3-2. Mm-hmm. It was another shootout that we got involved in. What happened was we just cleaned out a building. So we cleaned it out. We must have had 20 or 30 people we took out of the building, some drug dealers and other stuff, and we put them in the paddy wagon, right? So we're ready. Okay, let's go. We're going back to the precinct. We're going to lodge the prisoners in the cells. We're going to give them their soda, their water, let them go to the bathroom, get them all set, process the prisoners, and then the guys will eat. It was very nice. We were all starving because I would never let the guys eat a lot of food before we made arrest, because they would run. They were trim like you, Mike. They were young, trip, and they had to run. These guys had runners, Mike. They were running fast and strong and tough. So I said, we can't eat a lot of food. Have your coffee, have a snack. But after we collar up, then we could eat, munch, and then we're okay. So we're all done. Let's go back and eat. Just before we're getting ready to push out, there was they were fighting over a marijuana shop, a couple of drug lords up on 145th Street. And they were shooting at each other, bang, 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 bang. And then they looked down the block and they saw, we're looking, we got our guns out, they see us. Both the two groups of drug were fighting with each other. They turned and started firing at us. I said, whoa. I said, man, so we're hiding behind poles, we're hitting the deck, we're hiding behind cars. The guy was in the wagon with all the prisoners. He's worrying about the bullets. He's down on the floor of the van. We had 30 people in the back, So it was like, so I let a round go. My guys, they're firing up there. And now the chase begins. Now everybody's running down the street, firing the guns, Mike, right? So they're running down 145th Street, going towards the east side. And one of my guys, boss, Pete, you on the air? I says, yeah, it's Jimmy. What do you got, Jimmy? He says, we got somebody down. I says, one of us? No. I says, a perp? He says, no. He says, a civilian. I says, okay. Oh, Jesus, my stomach fell out. And we went down there. It was a young girl pushing a baby carriage, and one of the bullets, and it broke her femur right in half. And she was laid out on the floor. The baby was in the carriage. Mike, it was a disaster. So you talk about stressful situations.
Yeah.
I'll jump to the end. Because we interrupted the drug fiasco, the shoot 'em up and everything else, we got medals. We got the Medal of Valor because of the big shootout, and we wound up with a collar. We got the gun, the whole 9 yards. But we had the young girl, I don't know if she was 19 years old or something, or 18, and she had the baby in the carriage, and she was crippled. The femur didn't heal right, Mike. So those kinds of things, they lay on you, Mike, and so we were sued, of course, and we got medals and we were sued. So these kind of things, they come into your house and hand in the things at your personal house and sued. I've had a few of them, Mike. So those kinds of things when you're sleeping at night, it says, oh, Jesus, what am I getting myself into? And I got all my guys. I says, I'm leading them down what path, so to speak. Mike, you start second guessing.
Yeah.
What are we doing? Mike. So I just want to get into that stressful situation. And there are situations that are worse than that. But anyway, and I sort of delving in and made that a focus of a lot of my writing, that and guns, that we should be entitled to the semi-autos instead of revolvers. I made a big push for that as well. And I felt I accomplished something with that. It was something that I felt was behind my mind, how we could lose so many people to suicide. So the department is really trying to do the best they can. They got a lot of different agencies, and that at any point in time, there's 5, 10, there's phone numbers. They're in the back of the book in Harlem Raiders. It's for people, anybody who reads the book, they can see those numbers in stressful situations. It's for police officers as well, because you gotta hang in there. Don't give up. The feeling will subside itself. You'll get help, and better to be alive and live another day, because nothing is worth taking your own life. So that was the message I always went with. Mike.
I agree. And we've all been through some tough times. I mean, I went through some real tough times in middle school. I was a bullied kid, unfortunately. But even then, I always had that perspective that, you know what, I got to hang in. And that's what kept me strong. I got to hang in. I got people that love me. I got people that care about me. I think that's what every person, should think about in those situations. There's someone out there that cares for you and wants to see you make it to that other day. And you talk about stressful situations, and it's not only that; it can change on a dime. 1 second you're just making an arrest, putting 30 guys in the back of a van. Next second you're in a shootout. I mean, I go back to our mutual friend Bill Ryan. He posted something on LinkedIn the other day. He was talking, the night that Anthony McLean, a housing police officer, was killed, 1988. He was talking with Tony McLean a few hours before. Tony McLean and his partner in Brooklyn go up an elevator looking for a missing girl. They think they're finding a missing girl. Instead, they run into some drug dealers. A shootout erupts and Anthony's killed. So it can turn on a dime. It can turn on a dime, and that's what I'm sure you saw a lot of it in your 21 years. I mean, I go back to my interview with Don Sadawi. He knew a guy in the bomb squad. I mentioned him a few times in this podcast, Detective Claude Richards, who was killed that day. I mean, pretty sure the guy woke up. He didn't think that was going to happen. And a few hours later, he was gone. So in 1989, you retired after 21 years. Well deserved. What was the moment that you kind of decided, you know what, okay, I've done everything I wanted to do. I've been through a lot. I've accomplished a lot. I am done.
Yeah, you know what, Mike? I had gotten hurt. My leg got banged up making an arrest on New Year's Eve, and we did a bunch of robbery collars on New Year's Eve. So they were at the Times Square. So some of the young people were doing some robberies, taking pocketbooks and whatnot. So one of them, I went down on my knee and cracked the kneecap and split it open, and things like that. So, and what happened was, oh look, Lieutenant Pranzo, we can after you get fixed up, we can give you a job. You can be assigned. We'll give you a detective bureau. You can stay inside. We'll give you this, give you that. And I said, no, if I can't run, I was never an inside guy, if that makes any sense to you, Mike.
No, it does, yeah.
So I know, and I had my disability. Of course, they would give me in a heartbeat. We could sign off on it, go home, and I had enough. And Rochelle had enough. she Rochelle very well, Mike. From the chat rooms and such.
Yes.
She's a good girl, so she had a lot of it, a lot of all these threats, and the kids. She had to protect the children, and because they were trying to kill her and the kids in the whole 9 yards, and at home and where we lived in. So there was so many things going on, and I didn't want, I was so nervous about her. I couldn't sleep at night. So you're sleeping at night with a gun on your nightstand, and worrying about you having a nightmare and grabbing the gun, and keeping the gun so close in case somebody would try to kill you and the family at night. So Rochelle had a lot of years of that. And when the time came, I knew it was in my 40s. And I said, that was time to pull the pin. I helped so many young people, including Billy Ryan. And quick shout out to Scott Wagner. You're going to have him on again. Good kid. good kid. You know, years back you could do these things. Today maybe they don't have permission to do those things. But and you'll ask Scott next time he's on. We took him in the back of the police car and took him home.
He told the story. He told the story.
Yep. Yeah,
First time he was on.
So you were allowed to do that years back. Get in the effing car. You know, what are you doing? How old are you? 13, 12 years old. What are you breaking this? You're doing this. So you make out a YD card. Sometimes not even that. They had those YD cards, whatever. When we were young cops, get in the car and take them home. And the father would whack the crap out of him, and the mother would fall. And we did it for everybody in the community. Get in the back of the car. Today you can't do it. You know.
No, you know what? Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, no, that's it. You can't do it today. That's all. But we did that. So those kinds of things, I felt I did enough. And I helped a lot of the young cops to get ahead, like Billy, and got them their detective shields by pushing them ahead. And then they took care. They were so much smarter than I was. And they've been so young and strong. And Billy was arson and explosion squad. Scott, the same thing. I think Scott was a arson and wound up
homicide.
being homicide. Scott, yeah, homicide detective. And they made their own way. These guys are heroes in their own right, Scott and Billy, and a bunch of other people. So I know I helped so many people when I was getting older, and Rochelle, she was getting tired out with it, you know, and that was it, you know, and I pulled the pin and I just kept writing, and I wrote for the different magazines and such, and then the other ones and Behind the Shield and Stress Management. And then Harlem Raiders, I said, you know what, let's do this book, and Rochelle can type, I can't type. So I put it in Scratch and she would type it up and we put the book out. They came to me, entertainment company. They want to do a show, God willing. So we'll see if we get a documentary or something out of this Harlem Raiders. They love it because it's the family story, Mike, and it's a diversity story of diversity, hope, and freedom, we call it. And it's how a community can work with the police, something that's going away a little bit, but they're trying. You have to go out there and make an effort, grab those community leaders, go knock on their door. Let's go to the community meeting, get the police community councils going. And I know, and I still work with some of them today, especially the 3-2. I know the daughter of Rita Webb Smith, Abena Smith, is now the president of the 3-2 Precinct Community Council. So she took over in place of the mom. You know, so you got to get those key people involved, and police community policing works 100%. You need their strength, you need their power, you need their permission to go out and do their job so they can have a better quality of life.
Absolutely. And before we conclude, and it's been a great conversation. I'm so glad that you agreed to do this and that I had John. I've had so much fun. Scott Wagner told me this the first time he was on, you know, he's like, what you used to do, it made so much sense because, and this is true, good kids, I mean, kids that are wayward, obviously they don't care, unfortunately, but good kids, they're more afraid of their mom and dad than they are of the police. Because I have this running joke, not that I've ever been a crazy kid, but, you know, if I was, I tell this to my mom sometimes, if I was ever out in the street doing something stupid and the police got me, I'm like, just take me to jail. Don't even take me home. Because I'm more scared of my mom than I am.
Yeah.
And I respect the police, but listen, that my mom, that's no joke. So when you, that tells you though, but you know, that was a product of a bygone era, unfortunately. And, you know, but the intention was good, and obviously it helped him out a ton, and a lot of other kids too. So we conclude now with the segment of this podcast called Rapid Fire. It is 5 hit and run questions from me and 5 answers from you. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I hope I do okay now. I'm going to be 75 in a few months. So you're going to give me a little leeway here.
No, that's fine. And you can say pass if you want to. You're very sharp,
it's okay. Though. I'll give it a wing.
All right. So the first one is funny. I mean, you respond to a lot of dangerous calls, of course, but hey, it's a city, as you know well, better than anybody. New York City's got a lot of funny characters in it too. Funniest call you ever responded to?
I don't know. There was so many, Mike, but I'll give you one that I was just telling Rochelle because I was thinking of what to say. I was a young kid. I was in Midtown, and I was working with a senior cop, and his name is Bill. That's all I'll give you. But he was an older guy, just getting ready to retire. So they called him Wild Bill. And we went on a call, and it was a burglary. And she says, the woman, look, they came in through the window, and I think his fingerprints have to be there. So Bill said, well, look, we have no time for this. We're going to have the detectives come, and they'll fingerprint your apartment, and they'll find, which was a lie. They don't have any time to go back to all the burglaries, of course, but he just wanted to get out of there. So she was really insistent, the woman. So he says, all right, she says, and I've never seen anything like it. He says, look, get me some baby powder and get me some Scotch tape. And he proceeded to start putting baby powder all over the windowsills and all over the furniture where he might have grabbed, and took Scotch tape and was trying to take the prints from the powder. He was blowing the powder, and he was making believe he was taking the fingerprints off the windowsill. And he took it. Okay, we got the tape. This is your powder. Keep it. We got the Scotch tape we need. We got the prints. We'll run it through the system. Well, I was starting to cry. It was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. So that's one of the funniest stories, the clean funniest stories that I could tell you.
I appreciate it. It's pretty funny. That's interesting. That's definitely a new method of getting prints. Might have to try that in the future, see if it works, test it out.
It does work.
Oh, it works. Okay, so even better.
Yeah, no, it's got to be very light powder.
Yeah. So second thing is, and you can say multiple to this question. We're not strict here. Funniest colleague you ever had?
Funniest collar. Oh, God.
Funniest colleague.
Colleague I ever had.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah. I won't give you any last names, but his name was Chris. And we're going to see him in a few weeks, God willing. We're going to look at, matter of fact, we're going to get together with Billy. And he was hilarious. He was just a comedian like Mark DeMeo is. Mark DeMeo. Well, this fella, Chris, every word, everything was a comic act. He just kept things, no matter where we were, he kept things so light. And no matter what we were doing, he would get the prisoners, no matter what serious crime it was, he'd put him in the cell, and he would start making fun with the prisoner that he had the prisoner laughing. Now the guy's in for, robbery, or shooting, or whatever. He, within 5 minutes of talking this guy down, keeping him calm, he had the guy laughing. And this fella, Chris, one of the funniest guys I've ever worked with. Young kid like Billy, same age as Billy. They were all so young, and I never seen nothing like this comedy routine. When we're working, we had no time for that. So that was probably one of the funniest guys that I worked with.
That's a gift. That's a gift to be able to do something like that. It really is.
Mark DeMeo.
Oh, yeah, Mark's hilarious. Mark is, I just guest hosted with Mark. If you wanted, for those of you listening, I was honored to guest host an episode of Police Off the Cuff. So, and Mark, thank you.
Good job. It was a good job.
Thank you very much.
It was a good night.
It was fun. Listen, and Mark drove the car, and he was great. I mean, he's a very funny guy. Shout out to Mark. So third thing, I mean, a lot of people say the camaraderie, and I guess you'll say the same thing too, but you can hit me up with other aspects of it too. Thing you miss most about the NYPD?
Yeah, I do miss the two things. And I do miss the job and working with the community and such, making a difference. I feel like, geez, I wish, I miss the guys, of course, but I see the guys, the ones that are still alive. I lost a lot of people, like at my age, the guys that were older than me in their 80s and Harlem Raiders, half of them are gone, but we still have enough team left that passed through the unit that we're going to put something together, of course, God willing, a show. So, but I'm working with the people, yes, but working with the community, I really miss that. And I feel so bad that I could have helped in these situations. You always feel like I could do more. You always, maybe it's a selfish way of looking at things. Oh, who the hell are you? You could interrupt it. I felt that I could have helped. Maybe at the Panther situation, I could have been more proactive. Like I could do something there, or the one with the arrest with the officer who took the wrong gun. She took the real gun instead of that. I could have, been there. So wait, what are you doing? You get hands on. You're in there, and the trial now. I mean, I felt, my opinion is, a boss, a street boss, could have been there, and this would have never come to nothing. Would have been a nothing. Get him in the car. Get him up again. Well, I tried again. Get him in the car. This is only me, Mike. You got to take a good boss has to take care, especially a street boss. Not somebody sitting in the office, but a street boss better be there for those incidents, and he better be there to take charge and give the direction. He is coming in as a little bit of an outsider because they're already involved, and so he has a different pair of eyes. So when he gets there, a good boss, street boss, sizes it up Wait, let's go. I don't care how old or young or what ethnic or racial. I don't care what the situation is. A good street boss takes charge and yells out the orders, especially in an arrest situation like that. And I've always felt a little, every time I see those incidents, I feel like, God, I wish I was there, Mike. And it's maybe that's a selfish way of looking at it. I apologize if it is. I think I'm better than I am, but I felt that God wish I would want to go back and be there, be on the street with those guys, save lives in that respect, not shoot them up, beat them up, and all that other stuff, but help, help mentally and physically the guys that are getting themselves involved today. And I really feel bad for them and the community folks I feel bad for.
It's I do too. I do too. So fourth, after a long day's work, obviously, you cops, firemen alike love to eat. Favorite bar or restaurant in the city to go to?
Oh, no, God. We used to go to Mama Leone's until they went out of business.
Mhm.
And they used to take care of us in there. We used to give a few bucks, get the money up, and they used to feed us until they went out of business. But it was one of the nice places that we used to go to eat. And I wasn't much of a drinker or an Italian kid. And so that was, I will say, one of the nicer restaurants, Mama Leone's, back in the day. I'm talking how many years ago, Mike?
Wish I could have gone there. Oh, that's the thing I miss most about the city. Hopefully, when this pandemic's all over, I can go back in. And I told this to Irma when she was on. I can go and experience the food. That's the thing I miss the most. Besides my family in the city, of course, the food. So we'll conclude with the fifth and final question. I mean, 21 years in the job, a lot of wisdom, especially as a boss. Giving orders to other cops. Helping them out, not just on the job but off the job too. What advice would you give a young police officer coming on the job now?
Yeah. Learn to conform to the rules and regulations that are in front of you. The job changed. When I came on the job in 1968, now we're talking 53 years ago, I guess 52, 53 years ago. When I came on the job, the guys who were leaving the job told me, I says, kid, good luck. I'm glad I'm out of here. The job sucks. All right. So I said, oh, gee, what are they talking about? They're telling me the job sucks. This is 1968.
Mhm.
And every subsequent group that comes after, they all say the same thing. I'm glad I'm going home. I had enough. So the idea is for the young people today, be proud of that job. Whether, of course, it's the NYPD, you got to be proud.
Yeah.
So be proud of the job, be proud of your department, do right by the department, think for the community you're serving, and learn to conform. I don't care what the rules. If the rule says you can't do this or can't do that, you can't push, shove, curse. You can't pull your gun on this now here, and whatever there's so many things that are going on with them today. The qualified immunity, where that you lost your right if they sue you if you make them a little mistake, even a small mistake. You can't use certain force. You can't do this. You can't do that. So learning to conform to what your department and what the community, what the laws are. Be aware of it. Enjoy the job. Try to have some light moments. Try to have a little fun. Go out and do your best conforming, and behind your mind to say to yourself, can I make 20 years? That's my goal. Today, I'm not going to get locked up. I'm not going to have somebody else sue me. I'm going to try to do the best I can to stay out of trouble. But damn, I'm going to go do my job. I'm going to be as aggressive as I can be in helping people and making arrests, taking the bad people off the street and helping the good people and making a difference. So when you go to work, don't go to work and say, they're the enemy. They're against me. They hate me. No, get that out of your head. Go out there and help the good people in the community. Try to make friends with the people in the community if you can, and try to push out any bad feelings that you have. Don't start your day off with a grunt. Don't get in that car if that's the way you're feeling. Take the day off. Take the day off. So conform to the rules, regulations. Do the best you can. Be aggressive, be helpful, and try to have some fun and have some good time, have some laughs. Even with the community folks, have some fun.
Absolutely. And that concludes what has been another, again, really fun episode of the Mike New Haven podcast that I was glad that I was able to do with retired NYPD Lieutenant and author Peter Pranzo. For those of you that are watching on YouTube, that'll watch this later when it premieres Tuesday night at 8:30 p.m. Actually, maybe even a little bit earlier, because Off the Cuff's not on tonight. I don't think Billy's doing real crime stories, so I don't. So if
Okay.
that's the case, it might premiere earlier, because usually
Oh,
I like to run it later, because what
yeah.
happens is, and for those of you that are listening, my friends Bill Cannon and Mark DeMeo police Off the Cuff. I don't like to compete with them, A, because who am I, and B, of course, it's better that it airs alone in a separate time slot, because of course they have a bigger audience than I do as it currently stands. And so I air it after their show is done. But since there's no show tonight, to my knowledge, this will be airing Tuesday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see Mr. Pranzo's books behind him. Of course, I have one of them here in my possession, signed copy, which I thank you for, Lieutenant. Harlem Raiders. And you can rate it. You should pick it up. It's a really, really outstanding book, and it might become a documentary soon, as you heard. So before we go, Lieutenant, let's promote ourselves. I mean, besides the books, is there anything else that you would like to promote?
Not really. I have a great family, Rochelle, as you know very well,
Yes.
and great grandkids, kids. I got a son and a daughter, and I got 4 grandchildren, and everything. Retirement is good, and I miss. And I want to thank you very much. You are an up and coming. They tell me you're good, and you are good. You know that. And God bless you, Mike. And I
Thank you.
thank you for your, because I know you do everything besides law enforcement too. You don't just do law enforcement, sports and things. You know what you're like an encyclopedia. I'm going to tell you something. You have a great show, and I thank you. It's a privilege for me to be on. I thank you for having this old guy on. I appreciate that. I appreciate that, Michael. Thank you so much.
No problem. I appreciate you, and the privilege is all mine. I'll plug myself briefly, and then we'll conclude. For those of you that are listening out there, maybe you're listening for the first time, stick around. I'd love to have you. As the Lieutenant said, I do other things besides law enforcement, the fire service, sports, and news. Just had Howard Beck of Sports Illustrated on last episode, so I like to mix it up here with stuff that interests me, and hopefully we can continue to get great guests. I mean, we're going to keep with the law enforcement theme the next few weeks. Next week, I have a mini series called Tales from the Boom Room, in which retired members of the NYPD's Arson and Explosion Squad, as well as the Bomb Squad, come on the show. I'm going to have retired first grade detective Paul Pericone, who spent 18 years with the Bomb Squad. So he'll be talking about his life and career. And then May 3rd, Scott Wagner returns as we kick off another new miniseries, Captivating Cases, in which he'll be breaking down a series of homicides that he helped solve in the early 90s as a homicide detective with the now defunct New York City Housing Authority Police Department. So more great guests in the works. Again, and this was a great show too. We're everywhere that you get your podcast, and we're also on YouTube. And on behalf of retired NYPD Lieutenant and author Peter Pranzo, I am Mike Colon, and we will see you next time. Take care, everybody.